Part of what I wanted to say I couldn't deliver, I didn't know anyway. Such a bittersweet taste, such a perfect waste, oh, hiding in the back of my conscious state. Such a wonderful sound, such a beautiful way to hit the ground. I hear you call through the echoes of my mind.
Blake, pick a man, bring your kit.
I hoped today might be a good day. Hope is a dangerous thing.
Hello, I'm Sophia Jessica, and welcome to the Fan Carpet.
I found this time in 1917, very specific moment in the spring of 1917 when the Germans retreated to the Hindenburg Line, and suddenly this land that they were fighting over was abandoned, and the Germans destroyed most of what was there, left nothing of any lasting value. And there seemed to be a story possible to tell, this epic journey. That was the moment that I thought, oh yeah, I can write a film, because at least 90% of the first-person accounts of the war are accounts of things like the Somme, which really are, only 100 yards of land. And one of the reasons I think that the First World War is not particularly, well, at least is not as represented in movies as the Second World War, is that very nature, the very nature of the war was quite static. So when I found out there was a journey that he could take, or they could take, that was the moment that I actually started writing with some kind of enthusiasm, the treatment, and then I took the treatment to Krysty, and then it was she who really took it into script form for the first time.
I was absolutely fascinated with it growing up. Coming from a place like Glasgow, where it had such a huge effect, it really devastated the community. So, from my grandparents, that was passed down to me, that interest. And I remember when I first moved to London, coming here and learning more about it, the Imperial War Museum, so it was a dream come true when Sam, he didn't tell me what it was at first, he just asked if I was free, and I was like, of course I'm free, you're Sam Mendes. And then he's like, oh, it's going to be a First World War film, and I was like, oh my God, the stars have aligned, dream come true.
When any collaboration is good, it's like collaboration with Roger or anybody, really. You don't really know who came up with the ideas first. It's just you become a sort of single, entity trying to make a single decision. And the good days are some days where you really don't need to talk that much, So Krysty put it into script form. I rewrote it. We sent it back and forth until we thought it was ready to go out. But even then, we didn't really know whether, is this a makeable film, It's very, very big, it's very expensive, it's two very young men in the leads, It's a risk. But because we hadn't been paid for it, we could take it to the studios and kind of auction it, which is really what we did, This is going to be expensive, do you want it? And luckily they did.
He sent me the script, and on the front, a cover page, it said this is a vision as a single shot. And James, my wife, and I looked at each other and said, oh, it must be a typo mistake or something. Is it makeable? Well, I don't know. I don't think it was until, almost a few days before we actually started shooting. We've kind of figured everything out, and then we felt it was kind of makeable by then before we started really shooting. We did a lot of rehearsals and a lot of testing, so that's what you do, I don't think I've had as much anxiety doing sort of some shots that we did on this, but also the thrill, because after some of the shots, which, like 7 or 8 minutes, and it kind of complicated moves, and everybody's got to be on the ball, at the end, everybody would look at each other and give a high five, and, everybody, wasn't it? It was a real high.
Once they came up with a single shot, you then realise that brings a whole load of problems that you don't normally have in terms of how on earth do you construct the sets. You've got to string together locations which were right across the UK, make them seamless. You can never cut away and cut back to a different place. You've always got to make them look like they're right next to each other. So there were a lot of very odd production challenges. Things like the Brodie helmets, which people wore in the First World War, there are very few of those left, and clearly you're not going to put them on a bunch of extras in a film. So the costume department, Jacqueline Duran and Dave Crossman, who did our costumes, had to make them. But when they started looking at making them, they realised because people now are so much bigger, when you put these helmets on their heads, they look all out of proportion. So they then had to scan the original helmets and then scale them up so that when they sat on people's heads, they looked correct. So there were lots of odd things that came out of the woodwork.
Wow.
Sam and Krysty had a rule of no exposition, and so everything, it's just little bits and bobs that you pick up on the way. But the story is so present, and the film is so present. But I think the crux of Schofield's character is where he's from, and what he's missing, basically. And I think that's what the film's about. It's how these extreme situations, in any case, teach you about what you go back to. So for me, yeah, it was essential to know what all of those things were, and that was through a mixture of research. I came here, reading first-person accounts, and then also just building it myself. And there was kind of lots of different ways. I got into, through Dennis Gassner, the production designer, I got into Stanley Spencer and Paul Nash. I think his painting's here. And Stanley Spencer's from a place called Cookham, so I actually thought that Schofield was from Cookham, which is where Stanley Spencer's gallery is from. And I used to go down there, and there's lots of stuff that I used to do just for myself. But yeah, it was essential that I knew all of the little bits that you find out in the film.
Sam first said to me that he felt that Captain Smith was one of the few characters who were actually kind to the boys, and we've worked together in the past, and he knows I'm very kind, and I think there was just an element that he wanted to that character that was at that moment in the film. It's quite a pivotal moment when he finds himself on his own, to have somebody who's going to help him on the next part of his journey.
Yeah.
And coming into it is quite daunting because you only have a couple of days. I mean, the way it was shot, as you probably all know, means that unlike the traditional method, you're literally just playing your sequence in one, and once it was done, it was over. So there wasn't a lot of days involved. It was just a very quick kind of in and out. So you had to be right up to speed.
Yeah.
You had to do that difficult thing that all actors find when you're coming into a shoot halfway through or a third of the way through, is you just have to get on the same page as everyone else. But it was an amazing experience, and I enjoyed inventing a character. In fact, that stick came from the same wall of photographs in the costume department that Captain Smith has. Yeah, I noticed that a lot of the officers all had these walking sticks for some reason, and nobody else had one. So I said to costumes, "Can I have it?" And they said, "Yeah." That was my thing.
You have to work alongside the camera team and all the extras and everything. But the great challenge of it, you don't want to mess it up, because if you're only in it for 5 minutes, you don't want to be that guy. No, the great challenge of it is that if you're doing a scene that's 6 minutes long, and you're doing stuff that everybody thinks is okay, but if you make a mistake in minute 4 or 5, you can't just go, okay, well, we'll just do that bit again. You have to start right from the beginning. So yeah, it's very much like live theatre.
Sanders is their sergeant, so he starts the very beginning of the movie, and we walk along the trench system, and there's lots of banter going on. He's gently mocking them as he goes along, and I guess it sort of highlights that camaraderie that the guys all have with one another. I've been fortunate enough to work with George in the past at the Old Vic in theatre, so I knew what a terrific actor he is and how hard-working he is. And I've obviously never worked with Dean before, but I think both of them on screen complement each other so well, and they give absolutely spellbinding performances.
I don't know why there's less female writers telling war stories. I guess there's a sort of antiquated notion that very thankfully Sam and Pippa didn't possess. I think having more different points of view on any kind of conflict is helpful. I don't know if the fact I'm a woman brought anything particularly different, because I don't have the kind of outside source of being a man to compare that with. So I can't necessarily say, yes, it was super helpful that I was a woman, but it sure didn't hurt.
The major difficulty was like getting across the terrain and doing some of those really intense kind of sensitive scenes like with Claire, and making it all feel like a piece. So you're using a lot of different techniques, like, you know, stabilized systems, wire cameras, all sorts of things. But I think for me, the trick was try and make it feel like one camera all the time. I think that was the biggest challenge, really, that and the weather.
We took it to New Jersey to do a preview. There was one particular person I was focused on. I watched the audience. Obviously, I'm very used, as a theatre director, to sitting with audiences and learning from them just while they watch something. You don't really have to ask them afterwards. You can feel it in the auditorium. And there was one gentleman who got lower and lower and lower in his seat. And at the point where George ran down the line at the end, he just disappeared completely. And I thought, well, he's in it. Now, I'm not sure I was intending to put someone through that kind of agony, but you could feel it in the audience, that visceral sense of being connected, you know, moment by moment. And I think that is something to do with the one shot and the fact that you can feel the time passing, and even to do at times with losing all sense of time.
I probably made the most mistakes. You know, listen, Blake had a lot of props.
The sets were so incredible that to just get lost in a scene or a place for 10 minutes, it was kind of easy to be on to do that, because No Man's Land was, I mean, it was abominable. Like it's incredible the work that was done, and all we had to do was be in it, and that kind of those long periods of just letting go of all the technicality allowed us to do that, and that's kind of what gave us as close to a real person account as we could have got.
I felt from the very beginning that this movie could be, it happens to be two British soldiers, but it could just as equally be two German soldiers, two Belgian soldiers. It's about the experience of war rather than about the historical moment, you know. And so, but also I believe that, you know, through the micro, through details, through individuals, you only then begin to understand the macro, the scale of what they see. Through a tiny keyhole of a one man's experience or two men's experiences, you see the panorama of death and destruction that was the Great War, you know. And my way of honouring the men and civilians who fell in that time, and not just on the British side, but on both sides, all sides, was to tell the story of these two men just over 2 hours. And sometimes I feel like, you know, because you can go anywhere in cinema, your eyes get bigger than your stomach, and you take on more, and you try and express the vastness of war. But for me, it's a human connection that you search for, and that the best, you know, special effect is always a human being, you know, and that they're infinitely able to communicate in a way that image can't. So, you know, that was very deliberate, and I'm pleased because of that. I'm pleased it's making a connection.
Thank you for watching The Fan Carpet. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for more content next time.
I'm here on the largest of the Balearic Islands, Mallorca, with the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean Sea, beautiful mountainous landscape, the thriving city of Palma, quaint little market towns, a growing number of luxury hotels, It's no surprise that the likes of Audrey Hepburn and Elizabeth Taylor like to holiday here. So come and join me as I take you round Mallorca.
Thank you for watching The Fan Carpet. If you like this video, be sure to click that thumbs up button at the bottom of your screen. And also be sure to subscribe to the Fan Carpet YouTube channels. They're absolutely free and so much fun too. Be sure to check out the official website, thefancarpet.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date with reviews, competitions, the latest news, and so much more.